All right. And I enjoy reading your comments and questions. I'm trying to feedback as much as possible, but kind of pretty busy these days, and I can't do it so fast. And the final response that I made was yesterday for some of you. So it takes time sometimes, and I'm sorry that you have to wait. But I'll be sure to respond you. I'll be sure to give you feedback before the next class. So please wait. And some of you were interested in the this how archaeologists distinguish the natural stone and worked stone. It's a very good question, and kind of hard to answer too. But if you see something like that from the site excavation, it's obvious. It's not natural. It's worked. You see the intention of the human beings, right? It's shaped, and you have all the minute worked faces, by chipping one by one. And so it's obviously a worked stone, but and something like tiny knives, it's kind of irregular, but still it has an intention. You can read the intention of the human beings to make the stone into this pointed shape so that they could use it as a spear point or even knife, cutting knife. And the definition of knife-shaped tool is the work right here on this side. This is a sharp side, and this is a worked side. And you always have to have the worked side worked from one side only, from back to front, back to front. You chip it from back to front, back to front. I'll show you how later. But so that's definition. And if you can see the technology like that in this material, it's obviously intentionally made knife-shaped tool. The correct name of this tool is a knife-shaped tool. We just call it knife, but the correct name is knife-shaped tool because we don't really know if it was used for knife, used as a knife. I think I mentioned about it last week, but these could be point or spear point or knives or other material. You can use it for perforator as a perforator, kirine, or you can use the other end, for working for something. So maybe many of these Paleolithic stone tools were multifunctional. You can use it as you like. It doesn't have to be only for cutting, only for stubbing, but you can use it anyway. So, but if you see something like this is a obsidian flake. It's flaked off from the core. It's a very thin flake, very large. So this would be the material to make into certain shape. This is original shape and form. And obviously you can see a flat, no, well, not flat, but very simple face. There's no indication of being worked, being chipped on this side. And there's original surface of the material, disintegrated. So, this is a hydration, actually. I think I explained in dating, scientific dating methods, obsidian hydration. The surface sucked water and becomes like this dull, rough surface. It's not shiny. This shiny face is very fresh surface. When you break it, you see the shiny, glossy surface. But as the time passes, the surface becomes like this. So this is, you don't have any indication of being worked, even though it's pointed, but it doesn't look like artificial. But actually, this is artificial because it's been taken off from the original rock, original nodule or core, I should say. And but this could happen naturally too. If the original stone fell from somewhere and hit another rock right there, then this may come off. Then it could happen. So this type of material is very hard to distinguish, either intentionally made or naturally made. Now, of course, if we find these from other cluster of debris, stone debris, and maybe pieces of tools, then obviously you can tell that these were human made. You know, this is a material for stone tool making. But if you find this one out of nowhere without any other examples, any other obsidian pieces, or in natural state, then it could be natural too. So it's very, very difficult actually. Anyway, but as you excavate a site and find these material, almost 99%, over 99%, you can tell these are intentionally made. All right. And another question was, oh, the footprints of over 3 million years ago. How we would find, or how would that be preserved, was another question. And yeah, we don't find the footprints very often, because it has to have a very specific condition to preserve such thing. Footprints must be marked on the mud, very soft ground. If you walk on the soft ground, muddy ground, then you will leave the footprints. But it has, in order to be preserved, it has to be dried after that. It'll be dried under the sun and hardened, becomes hard. Then other type of the soil or sand or whatever would cover it. Then it will be preserved for many years, if you can find it, right? It's very simple, but that's how they were preserved. So the hardening, drying, hardening condition and the covering condition with other soil has to take place. So you can rarely find those, especially in the old age. So the guy who found that was very lucky, I should say. All right, and also I did not explain about one technology of the late Paleolithic period. I talked about the microblades, and about the same time, I think, it's also towards the end of the Paleolithic period, there was an invention of a spear thrower. Did I mention this? Spear thrower. This is a model that I made. It's wood stick. Doesn't have to be wood. Could be made of bones or antlers or whatever, hard and long. And on one side, it has a parts that's sticking out. And this is very simple tool. And we have no evidence of this in Japan. We haven't found anything like this. Wood or bones would not survive in Japan. But in Eurasian continent, they're finding some of these at that period. So probably it was also the same case in Japan. They were using this kind of tool. And I posted today on the Moodle news about the there are some videos in YouTube that shows how to use this one. So I posted one URL, so maybe later you can look at it so you will know how to use it. But I just explain it now. And you hold it. You have to have this string or something to hold on to. You grip it on one end. Well, this is a spear stick, spear haft. This is a butt, and butt goes to here, right there, and hold it together. Then you throw it. You throw it with all your might, but when you throw it, you release the spear, and push the butt of the spear with the end of this stick, like this. Push it forward. And as a matter of fact, it extends the length of your arm. You know, you have longer arm with this stick. So you have more power. You can put more power, force to the spear when you throw it. So eventually the spear goes flies farther. You can gain more distance, and if you get used to it, you can gain more accuracy too. You can aim at, with using this. You can control the course of the spear. So this was one of the great invention in the late phase of the Paleolithic period. Spear thrower. Atlatl, the alphabet name is Atlatl. I don't know which language it belongs to, but in English too, it goes Atlatl. ATL, ATL. Atlatl. Okay, so please enjoy the video if you have time. Also, I'm sure many of you are wondering about how you make stone tools. I didn't really explain about how in detail. So I'll show you how. Just a demonstration. Okay. Here's my stone tool kit. Okay. It's animal hide, skin, leather, whatever you call. And here's antler. 鹿の角ですね, antler. Two types. This would be used as a hammer type tool, and this is a pointed part of the antler, right? It's even finer antler, pointed tip. And with these, you can make stone tools. If you have, if you're making a very coarse type of stone tool, I showed you, this is a chopper, then you use hammer, just hit it like this along the edge. Maybe I can do it now. See? The tip came off. See? Breaks off. I'm doing it, it's very soft, so it's only a tiny chip. But if you hit it hard, you will get the big flake out. So this is one way of making it. And in the Paleolithic period, they claim that most of those small tools were also used, I mean, made with hitting with a hammer. I don't believe that. You know, maybe rough shaping would be a possible if you're making this tiny knife, and they would say it's made like this, but I don't think so. It will break everything off. So for rough shaping, of course, hammer is good, but final retouching or shaping, forming and final retouch, you have to use this. And this is not a hitting tool, but this is a pressure tool. You press it strong. I'm not doing this. This is a real article, so I'm not doing with this. The pressure flaking. I'll show you. Here's the obsidian flake. You know, irregular shape. It's just flaked off from the core, and it has a very sharp edge. You know, all around, very sharp like the razor. And you can of course hit it, you know, to form into certain shape, but what you have to do is a pressure flaking. And if you press the edge, very sharp edge, the sharp edge would break like this. Can you hear? You know, in powder, it becomes like a powder. So it's not really working. So what they did first is to kill this sharp edge by breaking the edge. It's not sharp anymore. And form a minute face along the edge. Very fine faces you can see now. Then you put your tool to the face and press it. So you know, now you see a little larger flakes. Chips are all called chips. It's not a powder anymore. And the edge is see the worked edge right here. It's not a simple face anymore. Let me do a little more. You have to be really careful because it's all glass. So if you're doing it for hours, you know, your fingers will be all bloody. Can you see the edge? Worked edge. Looks like a tool now, right? So that's how you shape it and make them into certain type of tools like this, knives, or even later in Jomon period, it would make arrowheads like this. These were made with this kind of tools. Okay. All right. So if you're interested in making these, one of these, just drop by and you can try it. The archaeology lab. Right. So now, so much for, oh, it's glassy now. Very dangerous. You really have to keep clean the place when you do it. Now, so much for the Paleolithic period, and we are now going into Jomon period because the Ice Age, the glacier period, ends finally. Okay, and there's a periodical classification of the Jomon period. Of course, it's a long time period, over 10,000 years. So you can't just take it as one cultural period, cultural zone, I mean, cultural what section. It should be divided in several sections too, subsections too. So we divide them into 6 periods now: incipient, the very beginning, and earliest, early, middle, late, and latest. I wrote this absolute dating here, data, but you don't have to believe it because it's still in question. Especially the beginning of Jomon period is in question in terms of absolute date. Some would say 16,500 or something like that, the earliest data, dated by the carbon-14, of course. That one's earliest, but some would say 12,000 years. Big difference. And still, there's a lot of controversy, so much arguments going on. Well, it all depends on not only about the data, I mean dating, but it depends on the definition of Jomon culture. Some archaeologists would say the beginning of use of pottery, Jomon pottery, would be the beginning of the period. And the other would say the beginning of the settlement life, the sedentary life, teju, isn't it? Instead of walking around lifestyle of the Paleolithic period. Sedentary system is the marker of the Jomon culture. So it all depends on what's your definition is. So, well, don't worry about those date. Anyway, we separate them into 6 periods, and I have to start talking from the environmental changes. And after, let me see, just a minute. I'll show you the, oops. See, just a minute. There you go. All right, this is the diagram to show you the rise of the temperature, change of the temperature. And this axis, the time, 0 is present, and 5,000 is 10,000 years, 15, 14,000 years ago. And vertical axis is the temperature. The right side is warmer, left is colder. So obviously you can see the temperature rose very rapidly towards this time period. And it's been kind of stable until today after that. And so this is what happens when a glacial period ends. The temperature doesn't go up very slowly, but it's kind of rapid movement, and it goes abruptly, very quickly. And also you may realize that those ups and downs are so prominent, it's really even here too. So people must have really, really survived, had a hard time, spending this time, hot and cold, like jet coaster. But they survived okay, and it was a very harsh time for them too. But as a result of the rise of the temperature, of course, the environmental change was drastic too, and especially on flora and fauna. The plants would be the first to react to the temperature rise. And you see, they had only conifers, Shinyoju, conifers and grassy lands were become abundant with other type of plants like broadleaves, koyoju, and other various types of plants would be come up and filled up the place. And the characteristics of broadleaves, many of those species would bear nuts and fruits, right? Like chestnuts, walnuts, acorns, whatever, all those mostly broadleaves. And they never had this in a Paleolithic environment. But now you have all the nuts, which could be a new food resources. And of course, they could not ignore that, right? And naturally, not only plants, but the animals who were living in the same environment would be happy to have this new food resources. Either they may be grass eaters, but they will not eat just grass. Some type of animals will eat bark, kinokawa, or whatever. Some of them would dig into the ground and to find some tubers. Tubers はなんだ根茎類ですね。芋ですね。Several kinds of potatoes, not potatoes, but yams and taro type of tubers. So that led to the flourish of animal too, plants and animals. So much variety of food resources increased in this time period. So naturally, their lifestyle had to be changed. And also, the rise of the temperature would result in the change of the sea level, as I explained before. In glacier period, the ocean level was so low that as entire Earth became warmer, the ice and glacier, and the polar area and high altitude area would melt and flow into the ocean. So the ocean level goes up drastically too. You see, this is level going up. And actually, it's a time period after the glacier, and that means another glacier period would come in the future. So this warmer period is between two glacier periods. So it has to have a peak of the temperature. Actually, what we know is that the peak, this is the peak of the temperature. This is sea level, but the same as temperature diagram. And it's about 6,000 years ago. The peak has already passed 6 to 7,000 years ago. And this is present, and we are going down. Let me go back to this. You see, this area is the peak. It's the warmest time, and it's kind of going down a little bit, little by little. See, it's declining phase we are living in. Even though nowadays we talk about the warming of the atmosphere caused by human activities, but if you look at it in the environment in the long range, tens of thousands of years, it's going down towards the next glacial period. We don't really know what happens with the balance between this human activity and natural change of temperature. We don't really know what happens in the future, close future or later. But for sure that it has been going down from this time period. This was a peak. And you can see this zero level is the present level of the sea level. And it was higher than present, you see? And I'll show you the map later, but the landscape changed, of course, too. And also ocean current was very cold and stable in the glacial period, but it warms up and everything comes like sort of, so to say, activated. You know, ocean current and also ocean resources, fish and shells and things start to grow around this Japan area. And Japan Sea here was a kind of cold lake because the ocean level was down, and the straits, Tsushima Straits, Kaikyo, and Tsugaru Straits right here was almost closed. It wasn't closed, but almost closed. And it was like a very cold lake. So that prevented evaporation of the water. And as a result, this entire Japan was very dry too, not much rainfall or snowfall in the winter. But now it's warm up and ocean level comes back and straits opened. So the current, this is a huge current, Japan current, Kuroshio. It's a warm current coming from the South Sea, very warm and very strong and very fast current. And there's a branch goes into the Tsushima Straits into Japan Sea. Now comes in, so this Japan Sea becomes warmer. Actually, Japan Sea is a warm ocean because of this subcurrent from the south. That's why you have a lot of snow in winter. You know, the north wind brings all the humidity from the ocean and hit the mountain chain of the Japan and shakes off all the humidity down. So this area has all the heavy snow falling, you know. And that happened after this period. You know, so many change took place because of the rise of the temperature. This is one of the artifacts, natural artifacts. Now you see many organic material in Jomon period because there are many, well, not too many, but various waterlogged sites in Jomon period, not in Paleolithic, but in Jomon. We found many sites that preserved organic material. And this is a site from Japan seaside that I've mentioned right now. And this is an artifact from Jomon period and seemingly a snowshoe. You know about the snowshoe. If you have this thick accumulation of snow, that you can't walk on it, you know, you just sinks into the snow. Your legs will be buried in the snow. You can't walk. So you will wear a pair of these on your feet. So you will expand the area of your feet. Your feet may be smaller, but this is bigger and holds your weight on the snow. And we still use it, in this area with the heavy snow falling. And they had it already in Jomon time. So that reflects that reflects the climate change in Jomon time. They had a lot of snow at the time, different from the previous period. And also the rise of the ocean would resulted, especially in the Kanto region close to Tokyo. The Kanto plain is a very specific area in entire Japan because this area is very, uh, has, you can see a gentle slope in a vast area. It's not like uh, mountains. Right behind the ocean is a mountain or something like that. You don't see that. You have a very low land and generally goes up towards the mountain area. And it's a vast slope, gentle slope area. Other parts of Japan, you see a lot of cliff and mountains coming close to the ocean. So you don't see this in other area. But as a result of the ocean level change, the ocean goes into inland area like this. You see, this is the present form of the area, but this gray area used to be an ocean that went into the inland of this area. This is better picture with the color. This is present, and this is 7,000 years ago. And this Chiba prefecture was perfectly an island, because of this. And the ocean went all the way up to almost like Gunma prefecture, northern Kanto area. We can tell that because you see this black triangles, marks. These are the major location of major shell mounds, shell made of kaizuka. Kaizuka desu kara. That means it used to be a coastal area. If you connect those shell mound area, then you will see the original coastline at the time. See? So this ocean that went in, this is a very gentle slope area. And since it's ocean and forms a lot of sand along the coast. So this is shallow ocean, shallow water with a lot of sands. And shallow water means it's warmer water too. It's ideal condition for shellfish to grow. And that's another reason why they had so much shell mound along this coastal area. Anyway, so much change in environment took place. Remember the landscape of the Paleolithic period, spruce forest of conifers and grass only, very cold kind of environment turns into this type of environment. Well, it's close to what we see today too. And you see various types of trees, conifers and broadleaves and others. And this is a reproduction of the landscape of this area, ICU area. This was drawn by Aki-san, Sahoko Aki, who's a painter, professional painter. And she draws this kind of archaeological paintings a lot. And I had a chance to write an article in a magazine, and we asked her to reproduce the environmental drawing of the ICU area. And she lives in Osaka, Western Japan, but she came down to ICU and walked all around this Nogawa and the bluff line and everything. And, she produced this beautiful picture. And this is a bluff line, gake desu ne. And this is Nogawa, flowing from west to east. And up, oh, wow, wait a minute. Wow. How come? I hate this mouse. Up the hill, up the bluff, top of the bluff. This is where you are starting. This is the ICU area, top of the bluff. And you see several houses. It's the village of German period. And you have roads that goes down to the river. And also you will see springs, water sources, a lot of them along the river. And canoe, dugout canoe, and hunting guy with bow and arrow, and dogs running around. All of these minute details have meaning, so you would look at it later closely, and you will learn so much about the German culture from this one picture. Is Mount Fuji used to be different shape in German period. It was not like what we see today. And Otaka flying. So anyway, it's rich in natural resources. The environmental change was so big compared to the prior period. Okay. And all the big animal, grass-eating mammals like elephants and huge deers, they were already extinct. And what they had was a middle-sized, normal-sized boar and deer, and and smaller ones like rabbits and all kinds of smaller animals around. And they flourished also thanks to this environmental change. And so much diversity of food resources that they could acquire in German time. And that's why they went into German period, and different culture was established. And but as I mentioned before, this wasn't okay. Here it was a peak. This belongs to the early German period, not the earliest, but the early German period. In later time, like Middle German, late German, latest German period, it declined. The temperature declined gently. Even though it was a gentle change, slow change, it affected so much to the environmental factors too, especially plants and animals, and naturally to human beings too, because the lowering of the temperature would result in less food resources, right? So, or I'll talk about that later too. But so decline of the temperature had so much influence on human German culture in the latter half part of the period. And at the same time, the activity of Mount Fuji, Fujisan, the eruption of Mount Fuji were activated in that time towards the end of German period. And that's why we see the different shape of Mount Fuji now. But that also affected a lot and on the environment and human lives too. So they had really, really hard time towards the end of the German period. Anyway, and there's human beings are very intelligent, so they would not just sit and watch the change of environment. They would go out and try to explore, try to use whatever they could use to survive. And they had so much different aspects of the culture too. And many of them came into from the continent. Probably by this time, they had this canoe, dugout canoe, simple canoe, good enough to cross the straits from the continent. Yeah. So may not be very often, but some groups came down into Japanese archipelago from the continent, I'm pretty sure, because we see something like pottery. It's not invented in Japan. We have one of the earliest pottery in the world in Japan, ever found in Japan. That doesn't mean that it was invented in Japan. And that only means that so much excavation, archaeological works have been done in Japan. Japan is a very small country and so much developments take place. So we have more and more chances to dig the ground and excavate the sites. So we have more possibility of finding earlier material, right? And not so much in the continent area, especially the coastal area like China, coastal China and coastal, I mean, Siberia. You know, they don't excavate so often. So it used to be the earliest German pottery was recognized in Japan, but nowadays they're trying to find more and more earlier stuffs in the continent too. So Japan is not the earliest culture of the pottery. But I'm pretty sure these are one of the earliest pottery culture in the world. East Asia was the place of invention. We don't know why though. But anyway, this pottery, introduction of pottery changed so much of the lifestyle. Uh, because in order to utilize many of the plant resources, some things, some species, you can't just eat it raw or just by baking, but you have to remove something bad uh, elements included, like tannin, really harsh. Like acorns, I've been mentioning acorns, but many of the acorns include this tannin and other harshness. You can't eat it, you know. It's really will taste bad and will harm your health. But they eventually invented how to remove those harshness by using pottery, because pottery basically is a cooking pot. Cooking pot, isn't it? Most of this vertical type of shape of pottery are cooking pots. And like this is one of the earliest ones in Japan, a very specific type. And you see the reddish bottom and black top. And that's an indication of being used on fire, actually used as a pot, because the bottom was exposed to the fire directly. So the iron in the clay will be oxidized, sankashite, and shows reddish color. And top will bear the soot from the fire, fires. Right here, the soot will attach to the top part. So when you see top black and bottom red pottery, it's obvious that it has been used on fire. So these were cooking pots. You could cook soup and stew your food, of course, but at the same time, you could use it as a boiling purpose, like removing harshness of certain plant resources or other things. So by using this pottery, their food resources were expanded. The diversity was so much bigger now. Not only acorns, but something like root, some type of roots are very, fibery, and very hard to eat. You wouldn't be able to digest. But if you can boil it, you can make it soft and you can now eat it, digest it. So there are various ways of using it, using the cooking pots just to expand your food resources too. you see. And now that you are shifting your diet, you used to be a meat eater, right? You only had animal to eat. But now you have so much more plant resources, and now you don't have to move around because trees and tubers, they never walk, they never move around. So if you sit still in one place and in right time, like autumn season, you will get a lot of harvest. And not only autumn, but you will get so much variety of food. Depends on the season too. I've shown you the calendar, right? German calendar. That happened in German time. And so they started settling down in certain places. They could make houses, solid houses. They could make build a village settlement and sit down and work. And in order to make one of these pottery, it takes a lot of time. You have to find clay, natural clay, and you have to mix sand with it, and you form it into a vessel shape. Then you have to dry it for about, leave it for about a week. Then bake it in fire, bonfire. So it would take at least 3-4 weeks, maybe a month, just to make one of these pottery. And that kind of work could not be done by Paleolithic people. They would have to be moving around. And these were made of clay, so it's kind of heavy. These pottery are pretty heavy and not portable. So it's not the type of tools that they could bring around for Paleolithic people. So the environmental change also resulted in this kind of specific work that takes time and energy. And they could do that in German time. And this is a Middle German type of pottery sample, but this shows the inside, interior surface of the pot on the left half. And you see a scorch right there, black scorch. And obviously they were boiling something, probably making stew or soup, with a lot of vegetables and meat or fish or whatever. So it's a indication of use. Some of the pottery may bear this kind of indications, evidences too. And top part bears soot, black, and bottom is red. See? Right. And let's see. Another invention, another revolutionary invention is the bow and arrow system, which never existed in the previous period. And German period bow is very simple. It's a piece of wood shaped into this kind of very simple bow. It's not too long. It's over a meter, like 110, 20 centimeter, 3 feet. No, 4 feet or less. And let me see. Just a minute. This kind of thing. It's too big. It's like a 110 centimeter. It's not long. This is what I made. Oops. You see? Oh. Got handle. See, and bow and arrow system is quite different from the spear hunting device. And I think I told you about that at the USM Museum at the very beginning. But you see, spear throwing is not very accurate compared to bow and arrow. You know, you can gain so much accuracy by using bow and arrow system. And that means you don't really have to have too many arrows. You know, hunting with a spear, you have to have many spears because you don't really know where it flies. And you can't really aim at the certain point of the animal. You have to throw it from the remote distance. From distance, you can't go closer to the wild animal. And but in the case of bow and arrow system, you can aim it from distance. You can gain more distance, and the power is stronger than just throwing uh, spears with your arms and hands. You use the power force of the wood. So many good points, merits in a bow and arrow system, and the it's obvious that the efficiency of the hunting were raised pretty much. So So pottery and bow and arrow system changed their lifestyle so much. They did hunting, of course, but not too much, not so much as the previous time. And they were living more on the plant resources now. And here's a very rare case of German pottery decoration. German people hardly describes real things on the surface of the pottery. They always go for abstract, 抽象的なね, abstract patterns. But some of the very limited ones would show something like this. This is obviously bow and arrow with the arrowhead and aiming at four-legged animal probably. There is a tree-like thing. No, it's kind of rare, very rare case, but and it's obvious that they were doing hunting using bow and arrow. And you find a lot of arrowheads. These were found from Kanagawa Prefecture. One site belongs to incipient German period, the very beginning of the German period. And they would show you the transition of the tools, hunting tools. And these are points, spear points, right? Obviously, spear points becomes shorter and smaller, shorter and smaller. And finally into this type with a tongue for attachment to the haft. And this is still a spear point, smaller, and becomes smaller and smaller like this. And finally into triangle shaped arrowhead. And probably somewhere in this process, they had acquired this bow and arrow system. So they changed it to the smaller stone tools instead of these. You know, it's a radical transition. You can see from one side. And this is a peculiar thing. It looks like a cross. But this is the same as these type of tanned spear. The reason why it shows strange shape is that they reformed it. When they used it, the tip part would break, and you reform it. You work it again and make shorter spear and shorter spear and shorter, becomes shorter and shorter like this. These were not designed as the short one. It used to be a long one, I'm sure. and these were worked and worked until it gets to this level. This is the final phase of this spear point. Okay, and these a little different. This is a smaller type, and finally lose this tongue. And so much difference you can see from spear point and into arrowheads. And the one of the biggest thing is the efficiency of use of your stone material, which I explained in the Paleolithic period. You have to have adopt a lot of devices like a blade technique, microblade technique, in order to use your precious stones efficiently. But now you only have to make these. You see, um, we open this better picture. This instead of this, it's different. You know, you have to have a big material just to make one of this, right? Now, how about this one? If you have the same material as this one, how many of these can you make? You know, maybe 10, 20 more. So it's really efficient. And this is sharp and strong enough to catch an animal because thanks to the bow and arrow system. You don't have to use this for bow and arrow. Just this one's good. This is kind of neatly made. This is a beautiful one. You don't find it very much in Jomon time. In Jomon period, you will find a lot of crudely made, badly made arrowheads. It's only a pointed piece of obsidian or chert or hard stones in many cases. This is exceptional case. So that also reflects that they didn't have to really work on stone tool making. And that saved their time and effort too. So much difference that took place. Okay, it's time to rest, I think. Okay, so what? 4:17. So let's have a break till 4:30. Yeah. So we'll see you again at 4:30. Right? Okay. And back to the hunting story. Bow and arrow system change of the device from spear to arrowheads. And another thing happened around this time. It was the adaptation of dogs. We don't really know about the Paleolithic time because we see no remain of dog bones or human bones or anything organic. But in Jomon period, we find a lot of burial of dogs. It's being buried intentionally. They dig out a pit just for dog burial and put dog's body inside, and sometimes 2 dogs, 3 dogs together. And you know, well, they didn't just dump the dead body of the dog. So obviously, they were dogs were a very important animal for Jomon people, and not only as a pet or a watchdog, but they were a good sidekick for hunting, of course. You know, hunting dogs. Uh, as you know very well, many of the dogs were hunting dogs, you know, in throughout the history of human beings, and being a great help for humans in that way too. And that also made the hunting so much efficient. You know, not only bow and arrow system, but the adaptation of dogs also made the huntings easier. they could chase around the animal and control the way. So I'm sure they loved dogs because they were, making their graves like this. Sometimes, in some cases, dogs were buried with human beings too, human body too. So maybe, yeah, you can estimate the relationship, between man and dogs at the time. All right. And talking about sedentary system, they lived in a village. They built houses, and the houses they liked to build was pit dwelling. And they never, oh, I shouldn't say never, but the major houses are pit dwellings. And they also had the surface dwelling too. Surface dwelling means it's just like our houses. You raise up the posts, pillar on the ground, and straight it up and make walls and roof. That kind of houses could have been made in Jomon time too, but not very many. Major types were pit dwelling. Pit dwelling means you dig out a big hole, probably 6 meter diameter is a normal size. And it's not too deep. The pit is not too deep. Normally, the average would be like 50 centimeter, 20 inch to 1 meter. Deepest will be 1 meter. It's not too deep. And you set up the posts and beams and stuff like that. Make a frame with wood and cover with grass to form a roof. And this is the reproduction because we do not have the sure evidence of the upper structure. They're all organic, so normally they are all gone. As you excavate the site, you only find the pit and other steady material. But in some cases, like the house that was burnt down in fire, and they may find charred material like posts, charred post, kogeta hashira ne, and beams and other parts, and also the roof grasses could have been charred too. If you're lucky, you may find that kind of things. And nowadays, they're finding more of those with the a layer of the soil on top of it. On top of the charred grass, you will find a layer of soil or dirt. So probably this entire surface was covered with dirt. And well, I'll talk more detail about the houses in later lecture. But anyway, so this is a solid house you can live in for many years. And the village, and as the population grew, village became larger and larger. And by the end of the early Jomon period into middle Jomon period, the population of the entire Japan reached a peak. And this is one of the example of the villages of that time. It's you see all the depression. These are pit dwelling pits. These are houses, remnant houses in circle, formed in circle. And the diameter would be over 20 meters, 30 meters. So it's a big village. And you may see like 100 pit dwellings right here, but it doesn't mean that they had 100 houses at a time. This is accumulation over hundreds of years. They would rebuild, tear down, rebuild, and for many years. So as a result, you will find the remain of all the total of the pit dwellings. So that's what you see now. But probably in this size of the villages, the houses would be 10 at the most. You know, it's not crowded villages that they could build. But anyway, they were forming this kind of villages. And of course, there are so many villages close to each other, maybe 1 kilometer away, 2 kilometers away, maybe not shorter than 2 kilometers. So if you cooking and raise a smoke, you would be able to see the smoke of the village next to from your village. You know, it's not too far away. And as a result, of course, you must have had a lot of relationship between villages and formed a very intimate network in between. I'll talk about that later too. Uh, and and the, as I mentioned, the Jomon people were not very silent people. I mean, not silent. They were so aggressive. They went out so much to exploit the environment. They were trying to find a lot of food resources, new ones, and you know, and tried so many things. And you need certain time and energy to do that, you know, and that was given by this change of lifestyle. The sedentary system gave them more time and energy. And not to mention the adaptation of pottery and bow and arrow system, all the subsistent work, uh, animal meat or plant resources, whatever, you didn't have to spend too much time acquiring and cooking and things, processing those food only, and compared to the previous time. So you have more spare time to do all kinds of activities. And they were not the people just sat down there and rest. You know, they constantly moved around, I guess, and did all sorts of things, including growing plants. They never have this agricultural uh, subsistence. Agriculture means it's a big thing. It's a systematic and it's big in scale. Vast land with everybody of the village member working for the same purpose, and you expect for the large crop, and that's systematic thing. You know, that's a big thing. But there's no indication, there's no evidence of that in Jomon time, except that would we would find like seeds of gourds, hyotan, and perillas, egoma っていうんですけどね。Egoma is quite popular now. You can extract oil from these seeds, egoma abura ね. And also perilla leaves are edible. It looks like shiso, but it's not shiso. It doesn't smell or taste like shiso. It's a different thing. It's the same species, but and you will find charred seeds of perilla and seeds of gourds from the Jomon sites. And these kind of species, these kind of plants doesn't grow naturally wild. It's very hard because a lot of bugs and insects would eat up all the leaves and stuff. So you really have to take care of these when you grow it. And so that means that they have this growing, intentional growing over several types of plants, including other types like beans. Certain kind of beans have been found lately. And what else? You know, various type of stuffs that they were growing but not in big, I mean, large scale. It's just like you grow your vegetables in your garden or in the planter. You know, you do that even today, right? It's just like that. You know, it's so it's not agriculture. You may call it horticulture. Horticulture. 栽培ですね. Instead of 農耕 agriculture, it's 栽培 horticulture. ね, small scale growing. And they would do a lot of these. And they could build up this chestnut forest that I mentioned in the DNA story. You know, I'm sure they did that too. And certain control over the nature they would be doing. And how about the animal growing? You know, domestication. There's no indication, there's no evidence of domestication of the animal that will come in with the agriculture in the later time, Yayoi period. But we see some indications about the like the baby boars. These are figurines of the animals. They made so much figurines of the human shape and some animal shape too, various type of animals, except for deers. They didn't make deer figurine. We don't know why. They made a lot of boar, wild boar figurines like these. And we can't be too sure, but like this one, this wild boar has a stripe on his body. And this is particular stripes that appears in the baby boar. When they were born, they all bear this kind of horizontal stripes. And these stripes disappear as they grow up. So this is obviously the baby boar. And these others, you know, proportion and expression may suggest that they are baby boars. So it's quite possible that they took care of baby boars for a certain time, because if you're hunting boars from spring to summer, and that's the time the boars and other animals are growing their kids. And if you hunt the parents, the adults, then these will be left alone. And then Jomon people would not leave them alone. So they brought them back maybe and took care of them for a certain time. And if they are big enough, when they're big enough, they will release. Jomon people would release those animals back to the nature. So they will become another resources. And that's sheer imagination. It can't be for sure about that story. But there is another evidence, which is there are several sites in Izu archipelago, Izu Shoto. There are small islands off coast from Tokyo and Kanagawa, like Oshima, Nijima, and stuff like that. And in southmost island is called Hachijo Island. It's way down south, and you have to go across the black current, Kuroshione, the very fast, strong current, to get to the Hachijo Island. And actually, I went excavating one of the sites in Hachijo Island many years ago. And we found a lot of potteries and Jomon cultural stuffs, including wild boar bones and tusks, fangs. And that means wild boar was alive when they were living there in Jomon time. And that's remote islands, so the wild boar would not be able to go all by themselves. So it's obvious that some people in Jomon time brought boar into the island and released. And since they had only a simple dugout canoe, very shallow ones, I'll show you later, but it's very simple and very, it's not very strong. I mean, it's not durable to the wave. It will just trip over, you know, with a big wave. So it must have been a life risking task to go across the strong current. And it's impossible. Just impossible to bring a big adult boar on their dugout canoe. That's impossible. So only possibility you can think of is the baby boars. Baby boars could be brought in on the canoe. So in some cases, when they catch these baby boars, they could keep it for a certain time, and they may have brought down to the island when they moved to the place. This is another evidence that I can show you certain kind of taking care of animals, not domestication, I would say, but taking care of animals. And maybe for other animal, we don't know. We have no evidences, but probably, yes, they would do all kinds of things, activities for their survival. And so they got so much variety, diversity of food resources, and they had the seasonal change of food resources. And I would be able to say they spent rich diet life. As long as they could get those, you know, fruits and crops and, you know, things. Sometimes they might not be able to get those enough, so they could have starved. But in general, they had a good life. And the reason why they exploited the resources so much and they expanded the species and types of the food so much, it's over 300 types of plant and animal resources that we have found from the sites. And the reason why is to adapt to this environment. You know, this is a sheer hunting and gathering economy, which is not stable. It all depends on the nature, and nature is not always good to you, you know. So in order to substitute, when you can't get acorns in one year, you know, and if you have other substitutes, then you could survive. So if you expand your choice vastly, then you would raise your possibility of survival. And that's what they did in German time, probably. And as you can see here, acorns, well, they don't eat it like this, you know, it's just put in a pot. In soup, fish, grilled on fire. And this is very important. This is mortar, usu desu ne, called stone. Well, in English, we would call it mortar, but in Japanese, it's called ishizara, stone plate, ishizara. And was used for grinding up, milling those nuts and other sources into powder with this grinder. And acorns and other nuts would not be eaten like this. You know, they would be the shell will be removed, and harshness will be removed, and the nuts will be milled into powder and formed into this kind of cookie shape stuff. You know, many of these have been found. The child ones are found from the sites. So these were the form that they ate nuts and acorns and stuff. And this is a soup. And other kind of fruits. This is akebi. I don't know the English term for this. This is a native fruits of Japan. You can get this even today. Akebi, if you go down to the mountain area, it has a sweet stuff inside. A lot of seeds too. And this is a grape, wild grape, so also native to Japan. And these white ones are roots of the lily, you know, the flower lily. Yurine ですね. You can get those in a supermarket vegetable section even today. And these are good when you heat it, boil it. And you know, all sorts of food resources. These are only a few examples, but so much resources were used. And this was found from waterlogged site. 低地遺跡ですね. It's been soaked in water, fresh water, so preserved the walnut shells so well. So many half split walnut shell. It's very difficult to split the walnuts because this native walnuts of Japan is onigurumi って言いましたね. Onigurumi in Japanese. Oni というぐらいで非常に硬いんですね. Very hard shell compared to the Western type species. It's very hard, so you have to crack it with a stone or something. But you see, this is beautifully split. If you crack the walnuts with a stone, it wouldn't break like this. And there is a certain device to crack it perfectly into, which is you soak the nuts in water for a certain time and fry it on the pan or pot or whatever, heat it. Then it would give you a crack right there and you can split it. So they knew all those kind of technology too. And this is the evidence of that they knew this kind of methods. All right. This is the mortar and grinder. Walnuts and acorns. These are type of acorns which does not include the harshness. You can eat it when you heat it, and it's kind of sweet too. You can still get these, you know, around this area. At the ICU festival, in autumn, the archaeology club would put up some shops and they will give you a sample of these. You know, you can eat it right there. It's very good to eat. And these are also the same species, does not have the harshness. It's a smaller type, and these are good too. You can eat it raw too, but it tastes better when you heat it. And so on. These type of acorns and this type of acorns, you have to process it because they include a lot of harshness. Can't eat it. And so bitter, you know. And those processed ones will be milled in this stone tool and formed into some cookie type of food. And talking about processing, this is another example of the reconstruction of the landscape, autumn landscape of Jomon period. The maybe latest Jomon period, drawn by Sahoko. And it's a river flowing from left to right, and there's a facility made of wood, logs and boards. And she's working with baskets filled with nuts and stuffs, you know, soaking with the water, fresh water. This is one of the device of removing harshness of certain type of nuts. And they're finding this kind of facilities actually in certain waterlogged site, even in Tokyo. Not in this area close to ICU, but away to the north, there are some other sites that showed this kind of facilities too. So obviously they were doing water work, various water work in this type of site. Okay. Right. But you see, these are all dependent, totally dependent upon nature, as I mentioned already. And the decline of the temperature would result in the decline of food resources too. And that did happen in the latter half of Jomon period. So that naturally led to the necessity of introduction of agriculture in later time. And that's called Yayoi period. That I will talk about it later. Anyway, for most of the time in Jomon period, they had this very active lives under the affluent environmental resources. And how about ocean resources? This is the modern data, the salmon and trout distribution, or the amount of the catch today. This is today, 19 what 2Ds or something like that. Black ones, salmon, and white ones, trouts. And obviously, you see a lot of salmon and trouts could have been catched in the northern part, northern half of Japan, not so much in the western half. And this probably was also the tendency in Jomon time too. And Jomon culture did not flourish all through the Japanese islands. It was so prominent in eastern or northern half area, including Tokyo area, and not so much in the western half. And we don't really know why, but probably that's due to the environmental conditions. You know, they had more, they had better conditions in northern half in terms of plant resources and animal or marine resources. And they had marine resources in the southern area too, but their flora in western half was too hot for those broadleaves that bears nuts. So there were not very much of the nuts resources in the western half. That's what they say. And there should be more reason to it, but still, they were using a lot of marine and river resources too. And these salmon teeth found from incipient Jomon, very early Jomon site in Tokyo. It's way up in the mountain area, but still in Tokyo area. So nowadays we don't see salmon in Tokyo area. They do not come back to Tokyo rivers in autumn. They only come in the northern part of Japan, Tohoku area, but they used to be around here too. So they have so much catch of the salmon in Tokyo too. And as you see, this is an example of a shell mound cross section. You see the layers and layers of the shell. And along the coastal area, the shellfish were one of the major food that they could acquire easily, especially in spring to summertime. And in some parts, the shell mound will be formed so much. And one of the largest shell mines in Tokyo area will be like 4 meter, 5 meter deep, just stuck of shell, only of the oyster and clam shell of the big size. It's amazing to see that. You know, they had so much activities around the coastal area too. And fishing gear, tackles, harpoons, various type of harpoons, fish hooks. They are all made of antler. I think I explained that at the experimental archaeology section. And antlers are very, very excellent material for ocean tackle. And yeah, I'll explain detail about these in later lecture too. And fish hooks are very old. Uh, in the world history of human beings, Jomon fish hooks is one of the earliest of all. So probably Jomon is the origin of fish hooks. I think they haven't found anything earlier, except for some cases. But this is solid fishing culture, as you can see, and that's one of the earliest culture in the world. All right, dugout canoe, and this is a simple one, and they had no sail. 帆はないですね. They had no sail. It's only dugout canoe, and they paddled. 貝でね、こうタイプですね. And just a minute. Split the log in half and take out the central part, and that's why we call them dugout canoe. And so naturally, even though if you use the big tree, like a 1 meter diameter, maybe less, but the canoe itself is very shallow from bottom to the top. You can't make it deep. In later periods, you will attach boards right here and raise the height, so it will be durable to against the wave. But in Jomon time, they never did this, so it was just a simple dugout canoe. And this is so shallow, and this floats very well. It floats very well on the surface of the water, but it's very weak when you get the wave. You know, it just drip down easily. So right. And this is also the waterlogged side, of course. All the woods were preserved well. And you see, I'm explaining the outline of Jomon culture now, and I will be going into the detail in later lectures. The next one, and let me see, ocean resource and preservation methods were developed, highly developed in this period. They could not preserve the food in Paleolithic time. Well, maybe dried meat, cooked and dried meat, or something like that. Well, not freezing, not enough freezing, not cold enough. And they did not have freezer either. So they did only have this drying method, or maybe a little bit of smoking method of the meat only. But in Jomon time, they invented so many methods of preserving food. And storage pit is one of the major ones. This is ground level, you dig a pit. And this is a very interesting one. This is a flask type of shape. This is wider at the bottom so that you can hold a lot of nuts inside. And they put nuts in there and close it up and leave it for months until you need it, you know. So you can save those nuts, the harvest of the autumn time, and maybe until spring or even summer, they could eat, still eat, use those stored food. And you notice the change of the color, it's darker and lighter. This line is actually is a water level. This is a site from Kyushu area, I think, Kagoshima prefecture, I think. And this pit was formed, made in lowland. It's close to swampy land. And the subcurrent water would come up to this level. And they knew it, you know. So they intentionally made the storage pit in that environment and put the nuts in there. So this underwater area would be soaked all the time and would help you remove the harshness automatically, naturally. You know, it's one of their invention, I guess, and so on. So much types of storage bit, and also drying food that's possible. And if when you have this pit dwelling, and if you build fire inside the pit dwelling, you would produce a lot of smoke. And if you have shelf or something to put food like meat or fish and other things on the shelf over the fire, then it will be smoked. You know, that's another method of preserving food. Smoke ですね。Okay. And talking about material culture, I'll do the detailed story next time, but I'll do the general one now. And of course, the pottery is the one of the major thing in Jomon. The name of the period, Jomon, stands from the pottery. Code marking. Jomon is a code marking, and it's from the decoration type. I mean, they don't necessarily bear code marking all the time, but many of the pottery were characterized by this code marking decoration on the surface. And here's a pit dwelling, excavated pit dwelling, the plan, and this is cross section. You see a post hole, and probably a fireplace here. But you get so many, this is only a part, but so many fragments of the potteries excavated. And when you reconstructed all the fragments found from this one dwelling, it will be like this, you know, abundant, so many potteries. Because pit dwelling, when you finish using as a house, the upper structure, roof and beam and posts will be removed, and it will be only a big hole on the ground. And they did not bury it, but instead they used it as a waste pit. ゴミ捨て場ね、として再利用した。So it's a recycle of the house facility. You know, it's a lot of work to bury one of those pits, big pits. But instead, they just threw them through the broken tools like pottery, stone tools, whatever, into this pit. So they recycled it. And therefore, in later times, so many generations after generations would throw garbage into this place. So you will eventually you will see accumulation of huge amount of pottery in here. But still, they were making so much pottery in Jomon time, and sometimes it seems unnecessary. You know, they're making too much numbers of the pottery, And that's one of the mystery of Jomon culture, but I will explain about that later too. Okay, just remember they're making so many pottery in this culture. And stone tools, obsidian arrowheads. They're not all beautiful. These are kind of good ones, but not these. And sometimes, well, not this one either. These are not in good shape. This is crudely made. But these are enough. They would function as arrowhead because the tip is very sharp, blade-like tip or pointed tip. And good enough because the bow is strong. The bow gives you strong force, and these are enough to stab animal and catch animal. So they were not a great stone tool maker compared to the Paleolithic period. Paleolithic people lived on stone tools, and if you can't make good stone tools, they could not survive. So they had so much effort making those tools, and they thought up so many ideas to develop the better kind of tools like microblades and stuff. That didn't happen in Jomon period. It's kind of disintegration or degrade of technology. 後退というか、堕落というか、the technology of the stone tools did not develop much, but it degraded even, except for a certain other type of stone material that I'll show you later. And here's a chipped axe. It's not the type of axe that you would cut the tree or work with tree. It doesn't cut tree well. It's a simple, easily made tool for digging the ground. This is a shovel type of tools. There are various types in shape, but they're all digging tools. And they made so many of these in quantity wise. This is the most stone tools that they made in Jomon time, isn't it? Because, of course, because they had more and more chances to dig the ground, making pit dwellings, making post holes, making burial pits, storage pits. They were digging burial pits for even for dogs too, and they had so many chances of digging the ground. They're looking for roots, food resources, and tubers. They had to dig the ground every day almost. So naturally, they had so many of these tools, and these tools are very crudely made, so they're very easy to break too in use. So you can just throw it away and make a new one. It's like a pet bottle today. Easy to abandon too. But look at these. This is the real axe for cutting tree and work with tree. These large ones are axe, lumbering axe. Small ones here are probably used as a chisel. のみのようなね、工具ですね。Chisel tool. But they were designed for woodworking. And surprisingly enough, look at these, entire surface is polished beautifully. You don't have to do that, Only the blade is the matter. And you have to polish the blade, but that's the only thing you need to do. You don't have to do that. Like there's so much culture in the world and throughout the history that made this polished axe or adze, but in so many cases they polished only the blade, not the body. But you see, these are the examples. These are not the only examples. And when you find the polished axe from Jomon sites, there are almost all like this, entirely polished beautifully. And that means they had time, they had energy, enough energy to do this, you know. They had so much spare time and spare energy. And that's one of the representation of German culture. Yeah, because of the environmental change. Not only that, but the attitude, German people's attitude towards their lives were so forward going ですね。積極的なんですね。Not, well, I wouldn't say aggressive, but they're very close to aggressive. You know, they exploited the environment and they did all sorts of management and made progress in their technology that saved their time and energy. So they could spend those to do this kind of work too. You know, Paleolithic people could not do this. They didn't have time and energy for that. So that's the result of the environmental change and the adaptation strategy of German people. Very aggressive, I would say. And so many organic material could be saved in the waterlogged site in German period sites. And this is one of the example of baskets woven with a tree box, tree skin, tree bark, split in very fine strip. You know, it's a woven basket. And you notice that it's not the simple weaving. You will see some patterns, you know, like step patterns. So they knew all kinds of weaving methods in this time. We are finding so many more baskets in German period and finding all kinds of decorative ways of weaving too. I'll show that later too. And lacquer technology. And lacquer is so famous in Japanese culture, even in the historic time. And well, it's called Japan in English, right? Lacquer work is called Japan in English and represents the traditional technology. But this technology is very complicated and very difficult to make one of these. But this complicated technology was established in German period and hasn't been changed even today. Almost the same. All the processes and you know the same from German period. So that also reflects their spare time and energy and their attitude to develop their culture aggressively. This is a basket, woven basket painted with lacquer, red lacquer. Lacquer is a resin of the wood, 漆ですね、樹脂, resin of the wood, and doesn't have color. But they mix ochre. Ochre is iron oxide. 酸化した鉄ですね、酸化鉄. Iron oxide, and you heat it to make it more red color, and mill it in powder and mix it with a lacquer, then you get the red lacquer. If you use the charcoal powder, mix the charcoal powder, it will produce black lacquer. And black lacquer and red lacquer is so popular even today in Japan and other countries, in China too. But they had this black and red lacquer in German period too. That's the origin, almost the origin of lacquer work. You see. Also, let's see. Oh, I didn't mention about the stone tool. They were, you know, these, including arrowheads and axe and you know things, did not appear in the Paleolithic time. You see, and they had knives and points and scrapers. They had scrapers in German time, but not very much. But instead, they had these and mortars and totally the stone tool culture was changed as this lifestyle, the sedentary lifestyle was established in Jomon period. You know, all the tool types changed at the same time. Of course, you know, you have to meet the needs for making tools, various tools, and the needs changed from the previous time. So naturally, the tools changed too, right? And, there are still controversy about the origin of the lacquer work, and there are lacquer work in China in early time, from the early time too. And some people would say it was imported into, I mean, introduced to Japan, but other people recently would say this is original to Japan because they went for DNA analysis of these lacquers, and they found the DNA patterns different from Chinese lacquers. So they were claiming about the domestic original lacquer species in Japan. But even though the technology is different story, it's not related to DNA. So I kind of believe that the first technology was came in from China or continent. But we have not the enough evidence to prove that. But anyway, uh, let's see. And pottery. I'll show you all kinds of a variety of Jomon pottery, shape, decoration, you know, in later lecture. But this is one of the wildest one, you know. And as you may notice, not very much, but you see reddish bottom and darker sooty top. And even this kind of over decorated potteries were used on fire for daily use. You know, it's very hard to use. You know, you don't want to stick your hands into this, you know, pointy decoration. But these were the daily use cooking pots, and the reason why they have to make this kind of over decoration will be discussed later too. This is the homework. Your homework. Just please imagine why they had to do this. They had to do this. It's not a free creation like artwork. It's not. I will explain about that later too. So this is one of the biggest mystery and most interesting part of the Jomon culture. Okay. And there are many monumental features like this in Akita Prefecture in Tohoku, northern area. This is Oyu stone circle. There's a big stone circle aligned around this area, and this is only a part of it. But one stone erecting. It's not too big. It's over a meter, but it's not too big. And four round stones and long French bread type pebbles were radiating like this. And we do not really know the function of this feature, but recent excavation proved that there are many burials around this area. So it must have been related to sort of a burial or ritual ceremonies. There are so many features, not only this one, but so many types of features, ceremonial features we call found from Jomon sites. And that would reflect their spiritual world, of course. And they had to spend so much time and effort just to bring those stones, look for the stones, this appropriate kind of stones from nearby and collect them, carry them around and erect it. And, you know, takes so much time and effort and so many manpower were needed to create this. This is the line of the stone circle. It's a big one. It's only a part. So they had to do this. And especially in the latter half of the Jomon period, when they were having hard time surviving, they started to make this kind of tools. I mean, I shouldn't call it tools, maybe tools, but not the daily use tools. You know, you can't use it for anything. And some of these are very, very big. It's over 2 meters long and huge ones too. So obviously a phallic symbol, man's organ, but finished so beautifully, polished and everything. And the shape is so beautiful. And these are made of stone, so they had to have so much time and effort, spend so much time and effort to just to make one of these. And even though when they were striving and they were having a hard time, you know, from the lack of food resources, they would spend time and effort for this kind of work. And these are called, classified as the secondary tools. And the primary tools are pots and stone tools that you use every day for your daily lives. But these would not serve for daily life. So these are the specific type of tools called secondary tools. And some of the potteries are like that too. Some of the potteries would not serve as a daily tools. So they made so much of secondary tools, including figurines and various ornaments too. I'll show that later. And related to spiritual culture, there is so much burial found in German sites. And these are 2 bodies inside and bearing bracelets, shell bracelets, a lot of those. And her, oh, these are females, her arms, and this is a stone pendant, perforated pendant made of jade, very hard material, jade, a beautiful one. And on her chest, so it used to be a pendant, pretty sure. But many of the burial, most of the burial do not accompany anything. I mean, you don't find bones, you know, normally. They're all gone in the soil, acidic soil. But if you're lucky and find those skeletal remains, you don't find all these burial goods. You don't find these. You only find bones or maybe pottery or something like that. But rarely you would find this kind of very specific type of burial. And what were they? What was she? That's the question. And yeah, we'll talk about that later too. Jade ornaments. Jomon people loved jade, but jade, the good quality jade, those greenish, beautiful jades, only could be found in one place, one area in entire Japan. So, but the jade ornaments and jade goods are found all over Japan, from the Jomon sites, from Hokkaido to Okinawa, even in the Hachijo Island that I mentioned about the wild boar. They have this jade material. So that means they had this huge network of trade, you know, things going back and forth among, I mean, that network covers the entire Japan. And it's very, very interesting. And of course, I will be explaining the detail about those network too in later lecture. This is one of the islands in Okinawa, South Sea Islands, Izena, in which I excavated many years ago in 1991. And we found a lot of Jomon stuff too in those islands. Jomon culture reached to those Okinawa islands. So they went across the ocean for long distances. And but you see, this is a tropic area. You see, there's a coral reef that only could be created in the southern sea, warm sea, and southern environment. And but you see northern cold environment too in Hokkaido area and Tohoku area. Japan is kind of long island from south to north. So naturally, the environment, natural environment, were different. It depends on the area, even in Jomon time. So that means you will see so much difference in cultural context among those areas. You know, Jomon people of Hokkaido area and Jomon people in Okinawa area, they did not do the same subsistent work. They did not do the same kind of work, and they produced a different kind of tools. Although they all made Jomon pottery. That's one thing very important. That's why it's called Jomon culture. They all made the cooking pot out of clay. Okay, all right. Well, I reached to the end already. Let's see. Okay, let's have another break. It's 5:45. So maybe 10 minutes. Well, let's start from 5 to 6, 5:55. Okay. New hunting devices like trap pits. And here's a pit and stakes. But top is not pointed. No. Just blunt stick planted at the bottom. And what happens is these kind of round type, oval type pit was very good designed for wild boars, I think. And wild boar, when it fall into the pit, it's like a 120 centimeter deep, and the adult boar would jump up this height. So they would just leave, they would just escape from the pit just by jumping. You know, they're a strong animal, a wild animal. But if you install this kind of post, what happens is when wild boar fall into the pit, it's stuck right there. So their legs won't reach the bottom. And that means they cannot squat. In order to jump, you have to squat. Whatever the animal is, you have to squat first in order to jump. But with those sticks on the way, and they cannot squat, and they will just move around right there. Can't do anything. So he cannot escape from the pit. And the point is, he would be alive. If this posts were pointed, he would be injured. He would be dead. those trap pits are not the kind of facility that you dig out and make the surface, hide it with the leaves, and you watch it from the distance. No, you just go home and probably come back next day to see if anything is in there. And by the time next morning when you come back, the game will be all dead, all bloody, all scars, stabbed, and dead, and flies flying around. And that's what they wanted in German time. They wanted to catch them alive. Why? Because they didn't waste it. Like if you stab the animal, you get hurt, and the blood will go out. And blood is one of the most important food resources for that time for German people. Blood includes everything, every nutritious elements, like salt and what vitamins and everything that made the animal live. So they would not waste the blood. And also, if you stab the animal, the animal's skin would have holes. They would ruin the skin, or they would ruin the fur. A lot of holes, and you wouldn't get the fresh meat either. It's starting to rot when you find it in the morning. So you have to catch them alive, and these poles, stakes, the specific facility for catching them alive. This is the system. So he'll be moving around even in the morning, but he'll be catched for sure. And they will bring him down back to the village and kill him and cut them. Okay? So they will never use the, wait a minute. Okay. And this one pole type, this also is the same facility. Just one pole is, big pole is enough. Big stick is enough to prevent him from squatting and escaping from the pit. It's very, very smart. And there's another type of trap pit that we find a lot in German sites. And this is it. And this is oval at the top, but it becomes narrower and narrower as you go down. And the bottom is one strip. It's not even a hole. It's just a narrow opening. This is another we're looking at. It's over a meter deep, but the bottom is so narrow. And you find it a lot. And probably these were designed for deer. You can catch boars, but the deers are good for deers too. And this is a different system. You don't see any remain of stakes or pole in this system. Okay. So cross section will be like this, Y shape cross section. And when an animal like deer fall into, the deer has a big body, stomach area is kind of big. It looks slender, the slender type of animal, but the abdomen area is big. So it gets stuck right there, and long legs pinched into the groove right here. See? Could be boar too, but good for deers with the long legs, you save the space for legs, and he won't be able to move, in the slit. You can't even, not only squatting, but even move, pinched. Four legs are pinched in the groove, so he would be caught alive. Very wise. And there's another reason why they invented this one instead of that one. What's the difference? Anybody can think of the difference? The reason?
I think you need to dig less.
Need what?
There's less digging with the deer trap.
Right. Exactly. You are right. You don't have to dig a big hole like that, like that one. You you don't have to pay so much effort and time saving too. It's very efficient, as you see. There are this kind of people. They're smart people. They're always thinking about better ways of doing whatever that is. And so, oops, I did that again. So they made so much improvement in hunting too. And of course, not only trap pits, but there are so many other methods of trap using wood, branches, sticks, and ropes, using strings. The most simple trap will be tree. There's a tree, and you wrap cord right here with a ring. The end of the rope or cord would be forming a ring like this. Can you see it? I'm drawing too small. Like this. And you install this on the animal way. There are a certain animal way that they always go through, you know, and they all must have known all of those. And like smaller animal like rabbits, they would go through it and caught with a string. This is the simplest one. And we can't find any evidence of this type because it doesn't remain at all, just a simple string. So we run away and disappear. So, but there must be so many devices of catching animal, not only bow and arrow hunting, right? I'll show another example. This is a deer whistle. Deer whistle. Made of bones and deer antler. And it's found from Jomon sites in Kyushu. And it produces a very high tone. Human beings barely hear. Well, you can hear it, but very high tone. That resembles to the voice of the deer. And in specific seasons, the mating seasons, the male deer would cry out to call the female deer, and you imitate the voice with this whistle. So the female deer will come to you. This is another type of trap, but and surprisingly enough, this same shape, same type of deer whistle have been used even today, until today. They're still using, the hunters still using this kind of one. maybe made of plastic now, but the shape is about the same. It's really surprising. So that shows how efficient this was, you know. In another one, this is warada. There's no English name for it in Japanese, or the hunter's term. It's called warada. It's a donuts ring made of plant fiber and bark, and this is a Joma material. But this is also used even today. Maybe not today, but until quite recently, the hunters used this. And the same thing they were using. And these are designed for rabbit catching, rabbit hunting. And can you imagine how they use this to catch rabbits? You throw it like frisbee, you throw it at rabbit. And of course, you can't hit rabbit. They're a fast animal. They will just run and flee. But you don't have to hit the rabbit with this. You just throw it towards the rabbit, where the rabbit is. If you see the rabbit in distance, you just throw it toward him, and you can catch him. This is very interesting. The system of the water is very, very interesting because rabbits are very weak animal, as you can tell, and they're always prey of the certain kind of birds like hawk, eagle, you know, those meat eating birds. And hawks and eagles, they flying way up in the sky and trying to find the games. And but they don't have good eyes. Their eyes are good only for moving material, like animal, rabbits, and jumping, running rabbits. They can see it from distance, up from the sky. But if he's not moving, the birds can't see him. So what happens is, I don't know, this is a amazing part of the nature, but the rabbits all know it. And when they hear the attack, when they feel the attack of the birds, they will just sit still and freeze, don't move. They will freeze, and the birds will not see you, and they can't catch you. That's a part of their nature. You know, it's amazing. And they knew it. German people knew it, so they throw this warada towards the rabbit, and it will produce sound. You know, the wind sound, and that imitates the flapping of the birds or something. And maybe if this warada flies over the rabbit, it casts shadow, just like attacking birds, and rabbit would be freezed right away, and he wouldn't move. He wouldn't be able to move once he freezes for a certain time. So you just walk up there slowly and catch him, because he's not moving for a certain time. And they all knew about this nature, you know, from observations and long-term experiences. And they all learned about those rules of the nature. They learned about the nature of the rabbit and birds and everybody. So they could invent something like this. Isn't it amazing? And so everything invented for efficiency, more efficiency of hunting and catching food sources, animal food sources, and so on, you know. So there are that kind of people. All right, I think we are close to the time, so let's continue the rest next week. And please write the comments and questions. And I'm trying to respond as quick as possible, but please wait. All right. And I mentioned about the final reports and what else? The lecture on US Museum. Well, please read the news on Moodle. All right, any questions?